killed. They said it happened in a fist fight at the Saudi consulate in Turkey. We'll try to explain what it all means just a minute from now. But first, an update on the facts of the case. Benjamin Hall is in Istanbul with those. Ben?
Yeah, hi, Tucker. 17 long days we've waited for this explanation. Now we are getting it today, and only a few days after Secretary Pompeo flew to Riyadh and demanded answers. What Saudi state television and the Saudi prosecutors are telling us, and what they're releasing publicly, is that they have now arrested 18 individuals connected to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Now, the majority of those people, they say, were the same ones caught on CCTV in Istanbul, entering the consulate and then leaving shortly afterwards. And what they say happened inside was a fight, effectively. I'll read you some of the statement. It says, a discussion between Khashoggi and the people who met him while at the consulate led to a fight and a clash with hands, resulting in his death. And that line, with hands, is very important. Remember, all the leaks we've heard from Turkey point towards torture, dismemberment, pulling off of fingers. So Saudi Arabia clearly trying to distance itself from the gruesome nature of this story that we've been hearing. Now, among the 18 who have been arrested, 5 high-ranking figures, and this is crucial. Among them, a man called General Asiri. He is the deputy head of Saudi intelligence. He had trained in the US and the UK. He was, in fact, the former spokesman for the Saudi-led war in Yemen, a major figure in Saudi intelligence, and alongside him, a senior aide to Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince. But that is as far as the connection to the royal family goes. In fact, they are denying any involvement. In fact, they're saying that they have to push back on this, completely restructured the intelligence services in light of this. So they are coming with a line of total deniability. Now, Saudi sources also saying that the king himself reached out to President Erdogan a couple of hours before this news broke. He wants to smooth over relationships with that country. The last 2 weeks have been torturous over here, a geopolitical storm, and that he's trying to put to rest. But the bigger question now, can he settle issues with the US? We're waiting for a statement from the White House now. We are waiting for that, but what we have been hearing from on Twitter are a number of senators. We've heard from Lindsey Graham. He isn't believing it. You remember a couple of days ago he came out firmly against Mohammed bin Salman. Well, he has been saying, to say I am skeptical of the Saudi narrative about Mr. Khashoggi is an understatement. So this may smooth over some of the cracks as far as regional politics go. Whether or not it has a lasting issue in the US, we just don't know yet. We are getting breaking news constantly. I'm speaking to Saudi sources. This is the story we were expecting, the sense that this was an interrogation gone wrong. It was sanctioned by someone quite high-leveled, but not in the royal family. That's what we are getting now. We have to see how it plays out. Is there lasting damage done between the US and Saudi Arabia? We have to see. One big question. Where is the body? Who sanctioned it? Why did 15 of them go to the consulate to interrogate one man? Those remain unanswered today, and we will try and bring you all of them as we get them from here. Tucker?
Where's the body? Great question. Ben, thank you very much. So there you have it. Khashoggi is, in fact, dead, as we have already been told, and the Saudis did it. They admit it now. What should we make of this? Well, the usual head nodders on TV seem stunned by the news. They can hardly believe that a bloodthirsty medieval theocracy would do something like this. Really? The Saudis? The same people who cut off the hands of thieves and behead adulterers in public parks? The same regime that is currently prosecuting one of the world's cruelest wars in one of the world's poorest countries, Yemen. You're telling me these people murdered a political opponent? Doesn't sound like the Saudis we know. Come on. Of course they did it. We knew they did it. Their only concern was getting caught. Now, they have been caught, and they probably regret the whole thing. All of that makes sense. None of it is surprising. What is confusing is the wave of false posturing on display from our own mindless ruling class. Khashoggi's death, they're telling us, is now somehow the most important story in the world. Far more important than the many political murders China commits each year, far more than Saudi Arabia, or the countless children the Saudis have bombed and starved to death in Yemen. More than that, they're telling us it's a moral litmus test, the latest in a long series of moral litmus tests that are delivered to us by Fiat on cable news. Support this, don't support that, otherwise you're a bad person. That's the message of almost every show. Share my beliefs or you are damned. Now, in this case, it's a little confusing because keep in mind, these are the same people, the ones commanding you to hate the Saudis, who just months ago were uncritically repeating Saudi talking points right from the embassy. Remember when we bombed Syria last spring and bombed it before, the year before? Well, the Saudis pushed that. Everyone knew that. It might have been nice to hear that on television. We could have used some media skepticism at the time. But no, only this show pretty much brought that up. The rest of the press loved it. They love all wars. The more distant and the more pointless, the better. Okay, but spare us the theatrics now. This is a stunt. It's an international incident hyped and manufactured for domestic political goals. Here are the goals. Watch this.
The president is completely in the pocket of any other dictators in the world because he admires their ability to basically kill or tacitly allow the death of anybody who criticizes them.
When Donald Trump calls the press the enemy of the people, and it's not implausible that the Saudis heard that and thought, no one is going to care. After all, these people are the enemies of the people.
And you see it with his complicity, and it is complicity in the murder of a Washington Post columnist by a Middle Eastern thug.
Spare me. Meanwhile, today, Congressman Joaquin Castro floated the bizarre theory that Khashoggi's murder was ordered by Jared Kushner. Even CNN seemed confused by this. Watch.
Let me get to the point that I think is most disturbing right now. The reporting that Jared Kushner
Yeah, that's a sitting member of Congress who just said that. These are not serious people. They know nothing. They will say anything. They are buffoons. Spare us the lectures, please. We'll have more on news from Saudi Arabia in just a few minutes. But first, another Fox News alert for you. Mexican authorities are trying to stop a caravan of migrants headed north to the United States. That may literally be beyond their power. Trace Gallagher has the latest on that story. Trace?
And Tucker, it's impossible to get an accurate count because the caravan is spreading out, but we still believe there are between 3,000 and 4,000 Honduran and Salvadoran immigrants heading north. And right now, at Guatemala's border with Mexico, there are thousands of migrants waiting in line trying to cross their way into the country, and in spite of got through. Mexico has now told the United States it would put up shelters, meaning tents, along their border with Guatemala. And Mexican authorities say they're allowing 100 migrants per day to come into Mexico. Those people are being told they want to seek asylum. If they do so, Mexican government saying they need to stay in a government shelter or a charity shelter, and their applications will be processed within 40 days. Leave and roam the country, they forfeit their asylum request and could be deported. Today, after meeting with President Peña Nieto, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said this. Watch.
This is an organized effort to come through and violate the sovereignty of Mexico. And so we're prepared to do all that we can to support the decisions that Mexico makes about how they're going to address this very serious and important issue.
But reports on the ground show that most of these Central American migrants are trying to come to the United States. President Trump, of course, has vowed to use the military to shut down the border if needed. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thanks a lot for that update. Meanwhile, the midterm elections are around the corner, 18 days from right now. And the central question remaining isn't just who will win Congress, whether the Democratic Party will remain a legitimate political organization or become something else entirely. Elements of the Democratic coalition are becoming radical. Some are threatening violence, some are advocating violence. Others are taking the next step and engaging in violence. Even the party's leaders, those with the deepest ties to the establishment and the most to lose, are suddenly saying things that would have been unimaginable just a year ago. Here, for example, is Nancy Pelosi. Watch her explain that people will be hurt in order to achieve the Democratic Party's goals, and that's okay. Watch.
We have to have total clarity about what we do when it comes to everything. A woman's right to choose, whether it's about immigration, whether it's about gun safety, whether it's about climate. We didn't even talk about climate. And if there's some collateral damage for some others who do not share our view, well, so be it.
Collateral damage. She's talking about you. You're collateral damage in Pelosi's remarkably direct calculation. Thanks for telling us. You're one of those people in the way. You're an inconvenience who will be crushed beneath the wheels of progress when it comes right down to it. You're one of those infamous eggs that must be broken to make the world's greatest omelet. Just today, by the way, a New York man called Ronald DeRisi was charged for threatening Senators Chuck Grassley and Susan Collins with death. Why? Because they dared to support the Brett Kavanaugh nomination. They were in the way. So did the woman in this video. She was in the way, too. She made the mistake of wearing an NYPD hat in the presence of a leftist. Watch what happened when she did.
Why are you trying to block me? I'm trying to walk here.
I obey traffic signals.
You're a snarky little idiot. Shut the up.
Try something.
I'm not going to punch you. I'm not like your husband. I'm not going to punch you.
I'm not married.
I'm not like your boyfriend or your cop boyfriend who's going to knock you out, so don't worry.
My husband died in 9/11.
Good for him. Good. Good. Those NYPD were a bunch of sodomizing immigrants with their bully sticks. So yeah, your husband probably should rot in the grave.
I'm glad your husband died in 9/11, says a representative of the youth wing of the Democratic Party. Ann Coulter has been watching moments like these for the past 3 years and writing about them. Her new book is called Resistance is Futile: How the Trump-Hating Left Lost Its Collective Mind, and she joins us tonight in studio. Ann, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So what does the Democratic Party look like 19 days from now? How do they put this all back together? They showed us who they are. What are they when the smoke clears?
I wouldn't judge how they do this fall by assume that these comments are beloved by the people. I mean, I think people have to remember a blue wave is the historic norm right now. It's very possible they'll take control of the House. Luckily, and I think a lot because of some of the things you just showed, and of course the reaction to Justice Kavanaugh, it doesn't look like they're going to take the U.S. Senate, but they ought to be having a huge blue wave, and they probably won't have it because they're insane. They've gone mad.
But the people who run the party, who are vested in it,
Yes.
I mean, the people who hold office or who, whose livelihoods depends on the Democratic Party, I mean, they must be getting nervous because they can't control their base.
No, they do this all the time. I mean, they did it after Ferguson. In order to help the Democrats win an election, they are willing to gin up race hatred, as they did after what happened in Ferguson. They're willing, at this point, after Kavanaugh and continuing until the election, to gin up mentally ill women. And they can't control them. I mean, once they've done it, they just walk away, and you have... I mean, you've seen the statistics on the Ferguson effect written about by Heather McDonald, among others, that the rate of blacks being murdered went up astronomically after Ferguson, and particularly in cities where there was an alleged police racist shooting. Incidentally, I've noticed that police suddenly stopped engaging in racist attacks on black people once they started wearing body cameras. You notice how they just sort of went away?
I did notice
The
that.
ACLU is actually suing some cities to make them stop wearing body cameras because they keep getting caught making false allegations of a racist cop, as a Princeton woman did. A Princeton professor made a false allegation of a cop racist stop, and there was a body camera. Utter complete lie.
Does the Democratic Party ever become the Democratic Party of 2012 or 1998, or kind of a party concerned with, economics and something other than identity politics?
It doesn't look like it. There was an interesting article. You won't hear these words come out of my mouth very often. In the New York Times this week by Thomas Edsall, breaking down all of these polls and how the Democratic Party has changed. And it is, I just noticed it remembered it looking at Nancy Pelosi. White liberal women have just gone off the charts on left-wing craziness, and it has nothing to do with economics. The Democratic Party, as some of us kind of noticed during the Clinton era, that was when began during the Clinton era, just abandon the working class, abandon the flyover people. It is pedal to the metal on identity politics and the yuppie lifestyle. It's basically the
moms
party
in
of
Marin and Georgetown.
Yuppies and welfare recipients.
No,
that's the modern Democratic Party.
That's never been put more crisply or truly. Ann Coulter.
Thank you.
Resistance is Futile is her excellent book. Thank you. Well, the wife of DOJ official Bruce Orr appeared on Capitol Hill today. She testified about her work with Fusion GPS. We have details from that after the break.
Tucker Carlson is brought to you by Alka-Seltzer Plus Power Max Gels.
Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts assumed she'd be a progressive hero on Monday when she released DNA test results showing that it's possible she might have a tiny amount of American Indian blood, or maybe it was from South America, not clear. Instead, she was ridiculed. Even the Cherokee Nation said she was, quote, hurting tribal interests by doing this. But then the Cherokee Nation made a mistake. As someone called Zerlina Maxwell at MSNBC explained, there's only one possible explanation for any group criticizing a Democrat. Do you know what it is? We're going to give you one guess. What's the explanation? Oh, racist, of course. Watch.
The Cherokee Nation response was problematic because it actually ignores the fact that DNA testing historically has been used to exclude black natives from tribal affiliation. And so that history has been completely lost in this entire conversation, and that's potentially very unfortunate.
So the Cherokee Nation is racist for criticizing Elizabeth Warren, who's way whiter than you are. Because it's not racist to make up a bogus racial identity to game the system and advance your career. But if you call someone out for that, who's a sitting Democrat, that's real racism. So just be sure to update your definitions tonight. Meanwhile, the wife of senior DOJ official Bruce Orr appeared on Capitol Hill today. Nellie Orr worked for Fusion GPS during the 2016 election cycle when her husband met with Christopher Steele about the infamous Trump dossier. But during her testimony to a House panel today, Nellie Orr invoked spousal privilege in order to limit what she told lawmakers. Was she right to do that? What didn't she say? Jonathan Turley is a professor at George Washington University Law School. He's been watching all of this closely and joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on. I assume it's legitimate to invoke spousal privilege. It sounds legitimate to me anyway, as a non-lawyer. What do you think she was hoping not to say?
Well, it's pretty rare to have a spousal claim raised, particularly with all the advancement that women have been able to achieve. To have someone in an important position refuse to answer questions from an oversight committee by returning to a spousal status is problematic because there's serious questions that have been raised here, conflicts in the testimony that people have cited with regard to her husband. What we really have to find out is what is the real record here? When were contacts made? Who were the people that presented this information that ultimately went to the FISA court? None of those questions are being answered right now.
So you do make, I think, a great point, which is if she's saying she can't answer questions to an oversight body, congressional oversight body, because it's her husband and they're too close and they shouldn't be required to violate the privacy that exists between them, then was it appropriate for them to be working even indirectly in a government setting, which they were?
Well, that's the problem, is that you seem to have sort of alternative reasoning. You can claim the fifth, and if I don't use the fifth, he's my spouse, and if he's not his spouse, I'm his minister, something along those lines. She hasn't claimed the full array, but the point is still that there's information that an oversight committee requires. I honestly don't know how serious these allegations are. I think we should know. We do need some of these answers. Now, Mr. Orr has made statements about when he first interacted with this company on this issue that seem to be in contradiction with the statements of other witnesses. That's always a serious problem for Congress. Now, the fact is his wife was an officer of that company, was an employee of that company, directly involved in these allegations. And if we now are going to have spousal immunity claims, it really creates a serious problem in terms of having, couples each for their own merit achieving positions of authority if we have to face these types of spousal claims.
Well, yeah, especially when you have a law enforcement agency going to Hillary Clinton's Oppo people for information, right, that winds up at the base of a criminal investigation. It's a problem. Professor, thank you very much for that very clear explanation. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, female athletes increasingly finding themselves outclassed by biological men in their sports. What is the future of women's sports in the age of transgenderism? It's a real question, and we're going to ask it next. Ship of Fools, #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It explains how Washington elites have abandoned the interests of everyone else. Grab a copy, any bookstore.
In an era of online retail where everything is just a few clicks away, buying a car...
Now, athletics may be coming to an end. A new age is upon us, the age of the transgender athlete. Rachel McKinnon, a biological male, has just become the first transgender person to win a world title in cycling. On Sunday, McKinnon won the women's 35-44 sprint at the World Championships in Los Angeles. The third-place finisher in that race has publicly complained that the result was unfair. McKinnon replied by denouncing this person for transphobia, which is almost always the way it goes. Don't respond on the merits, attack the motives. Amy Peikoff is a feminist, a talk show host, and blogs at don'tletitgo.com, and she joins us tonight. Amy, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me on. It's good to be here.
Oh, well, I just want to get your take on this. So, look, women's athletics exists in a separate category for a biological reason, because women on average, not all, but on average, are differently built.
Yes.
And so this seems like a huge challenge to the idea of women's athletics, and yet none of the people whose job it is to defend women, they tell us, are saying anything about it. Why is that?
I don't know why it is, because I believe that it's a wonderful thing that most of our societies today allow for women to compete in athletics, because it gives you, the thrill of competition, a great sense of accomplishment, plus all the benefits of exercise and everything else. And this enterprise depends on segregating women for what it is. Why? Because women are on average less strong than men are, right? We have less muscle mass. And so there really is an issue here, and I'll get into the science a little if you give me a chance. But one thing I want to say overall is Professor McKinnon, I disagree with her about what a right to compete is. I don't understand it the way that she does. A right to compete does not entail the right to have an organization host a competition that is willing to accept you as a competitor. If those exist out there, it's great. And as I said, I'm very happy that we do have women's competition.
But what would happen to the WNBA if men describe themselves, biological men, and I don't want to get into the debate. I mean, call yourself whatever you want, but biology's real, and if biological men compete, then that disenfranchises the women who make real salaries.
Yeah, I'm going to call them transgender females because in general I'm supportive of transgenders, and I've got quite a bit of education about it from a great blogger. He goes by HD. He has a blog called Hormones Demystified, and he first of all, told me that this is a real condition, but he also pointed me to some research. And Tucker, there's very little research that is quantitative in terms of the amount of muscle mass that transgender females retain even after going through
but so wouldn't you want to do, I think the essence of what you said is there's very little research. We don't know.
Right, and there is one study, and the one study that does exist shows that transgender females retain more muscle mass than biological females who haven't gone through any hormone treatment.
Of course they do, but why wouldn't the people in charge of protecting women from unfair competition be standing up and saying, I'm sorry, my job is to protect women. Where are the protectors?
I think because so many of them are liberal-minded and they have in mind this overall right to compete again. The idea that everybody who wants to compete has a right to be allowed to participate in a competition of their choice, perhaps.
But the rights of everyone else also, I would say, play a role, but not in this case. Amy, thank you for that smart explanation of it. I appreciate it. We have more on Saudi Arabia's admission that they did, in fact, kill Jamal Khashoggi. The biggest story in the world. Why is that exactly? Plus, it's been 2 years. Rosie O'Donnell still has not recovered from the election. Say a prayer for her. We'll show you her meltdown just ahead.
We are going to right the ship. There's no way that he's going to prevail because he's evil. He's dark. It's the opposite of what America stands for.
With it. To experience a place between dreams and...
India has admitted tonight that missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi is in fact dead. They concede that he was killed by Saudis during what they said was a fistfight in their consulate in Turkey. While the Saudis blame what you just heard, a lot of the left has decided that President Trump is to blame somehow, though there's no evidence he was in the consulate when the killing took place. Chris Hahn is an attorney, radio show host, and former staffer to Senator Chuck Schumer. He joins us tonight. Chris, great to see you. We're all very anti-Saudi now.
Thanks,
as someone who's been anti-Saudi for a long time, it's nice to have some company. Where were all these chest beaters last spring when the United States bombed Syria in part at the direction of Saudi Arabia, and everybody on the left, including your former boss Chuck Schumer, said, oh, no, it's a very good idea to do the bidding of Saudi Arabia. But now anyone who says anything about Saudi Arabia is immoral. Like, how did that change exactly?
Look, I have always been concerned with Saudi Arabia. I'm a New Yorker who worked in the United States Senate after 9/11, and I don't trust them. They gave aid and comfort to the people who bombed us. And I don't understand how we're looking at what MBS did to Khashoggi any differently than we're looking at what al-Qaeda did to Daniel Pearl. This is an act of terror, and it needs to be dealt with that way. Now, as for Trump's role in this, he has been
hold on, stop. Wait, before you get all the Trump, whatever, he's sucking up to dictators, right? Says the party that sucks up to China. Anyway, a sincere question. Has to be dealt with how? So you're pushing for, I guess, another war, this one against the Saudis?
No,
tell us all the new wars that we need.
I think that I think that we need to insist. Look, we have a lot of leverage over Saudi Arabia, especially in their security in the Middle East, and we need to insist that this man is not installed permanently on the throne. He's right now the crown prince. Obviously, the king is. So
we're going to destabilize. But this is like foreign policy by cable news. My favorite kind. So what happens when the Saudi kingdom, the royal family, no longer controls? I know we are controls their own country.
Yeah.
Like, what would happen if the Saudi royal family collapsed? What do you think the aftermath would look like?
Last I checked, there's about 40 other princes in Saudi Arabia that they can choose from. In fact, MBS wasn't even originally in line for the throne, and I don't think it's up to us to support dictators and terrorists. And I'm sorry, what he did to Khashoggi was not just about Khashoggi, it was about every journalist who threatened him anywhere in the world. And this is something
how are journalists in China? Hold on. How are journalists?
And the president of the United States, is acting very weak here.
Yes, please save me the moral posturing. It's too dumb, actually. Let me just ask. I just want to know what the standards are here. So obviously, journalists in China are killed far more often than they're killed in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, China being a huge funder and supporter of the Democratic Party and a favor of the Democratic Party. Are we going to apply these new standards to China?
I don't know where you get that from, but okay.
Oh, really?
Look, I think that we should stand
Maybe
up
I should show you the tape of Dianne Feinstein pledging allegiance to China.
We should stand
across the board, it doesn't matter.
Values wherever they are threatened anywhere. We should stand. Look, Khashoggi was an American permanent resident, and our law treats permanent residents the same as it does citizens, and this president should respond the same way. He killed somebody who was under our protection, and if the president doesn't respond, it's because he's weak.
Cool it with the moral outrage, okay? I think we're all a little sick of it.
Well, how can we not be outraged? How can we not be outraged?
Well, I don't know, because there's a long list of things to be outraged by. How about the war in Yemen, which the Saudis have been prosecuting, which killed untold children? I don't remember you holding a press conference to express outrage about that. Oh, you are?
I am outraged by that, too. But we're talking about this tonight, Tucker. And I want to know if you think the Khashoggi killing is different than the Daniel Pearl killing, because I don't think it is.
Of course
Is it?
Look, I'm not.
Is it?
I think
Tell me.
I think the Saudi government is medieval and terrifying. I think it's different in like 50 ways.
Yes,
This question is so stupid.
Right.
I'm not sure how to respond to it.
We are in mutual agreement, Tucker. I agree with you. I do not like what's going on there. I don't like what a lot of things are going on around the world. But we have a lot of leverage over the Saudis, and we should use it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. New war. Thanks, Chris. Glenn Greenwald co-founded The Intercept. He just published a piece on what he says is the Washington Post hypocrisy about Saudi Arabia. He joins us tonight. So, Glenn, before I ask you about the piece that you wrote, unravel this for me. And I just want to be totally clear. I've never been on the side of Saudi Arabia. I hate how they're controlling our foreign policy, particularly in Syria. But why the outrage about this now? I'm a little confused by it.
The Saudis have been murdering journalists, murdering dissidents for decades. They've been doing it at a heightened rate for the last 2 years. As you just said, the Obama administration was arming the Saudis in order to create the worst humanitarian crisis in Yemen by slaughtering civilians by the thousands, imposing famine conditions on millions. The Trump administration has done the same. The reason people in Washington suddenly decided that they're angry about Saudi Arabia is because this time their victim is somebody who they ran into in Washington restaurants and who is popular in Washington social circles. That's the reality. They didn't care at all when the victims of Saudi Arabia, by the hundreds of thousands, were people that they didn't like or didn't care. It's just this time they killed one of their friends.
How deep would you say, give us a quick overview of how deep the ties between the Saudi royal family and official Washington go, including in the journalistic establishment in Washington?
It's impossible to overstate. When the Crown Prince came here, he had the red carpet rolled out for him by Hollywood. He met with Oprah. By Silicon Valley, he met with Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. In Washington, he met with the leaders of all the parties. Saudi Arabia has been a critical financial partner and military partner for the U.S. for a long time. The interests go so deep in Wall Street and the defense industry. And then, as it turns out, even the Washington Post, as they were going around demanding that everybody sever all ties with Saudi Arabia because it's immoral now that they've killed one of their journalists, had on their staff 2 writers who both work at lobbying firms that had extremely lucrative contracts with the Saudi government. So the Washington Post was paying people, unbeknownst to their readers, to publish articles at the same time that they were getting paid by the Saudis to do messaging and other lobbying work for that same regime.
Can you very quickly tell us who they are so those of us who read the Post can know that as we assess their writing?
Yeah, I mean, the 2 of them are Carter Eskew, who was the top-level Gore advisor back in 2000, who formed the Glover Park Group, which is mostly Democratic elites. And the other one is Ed Rogers, a longtime Republican operative, who is a founding partner in Haley Barbour's firm, the former head of the RNC, who was in charge of communications for the Saudis in Washington. And they were both Washington Post writers for a long time now, unbeknownst to readers, and they were only told that they had to get rid of their Saudi contracts once we published our article by the Washington Post. But so many major media outlets, including all the cable news networks, have regular commentators who work for consultant and lobbying firms who are paid to disseminate messaging unbeknownst to the people who are hearing them. And it should be a huge journalism scandal.
The totally fearless Glenn Greenwald. Thank you, as always.
Thanks, Tucker.
With the midterm elections closing in, one New York Times editorial board member has a simple request for Hillary Clinton. Please be quiet. It's not helping. That's next. Clinton's 2016 defeat to Donald Trump and Washington's reaction to it exposed the way the people in charge really feel about you. They have total contempt. That's described in great detail in a new book, Ship of Fools.
Why bother mastering?
Hillary Clinton failed the Democratic Party 2 years ago, but she's been determined to remain in the public eye ever since. Now the New York Times editorial board is fed up with it. In an opinion piece, board member Michelle Cottle complains about Clinton's masterclass in distraction. She says Clinton's recent stunts, her attacks on civility, for example, are diluting the party's message and could cause them to suffer more defeats at the ballot box. In short, Hillary, please go away for just a few minutes. Dave Rubin hosts the Rubin Report, and he joins us tonight. What do you make of that? Great to see you, by the way.
Good to see you,
One
my
of the benefits of being in Los Angeles is you're on the set. What do you make of Hillary Clinton with, I mean, she is still the standard bearer of the party, isn't she? She was the last nominee.
Yeah, I mean, look, this line about civility, that we can no longer be civil with our political opponents, think about what that really means. I mean, just word it differently. We should start being uncivil, right? That's what she's really saying. So what does that really mean? Hunt them down in restaurants, find them in elevators, go to their jobs? Should we stop them on the road? I mean, where does this go? The thing that we have in America is that we can do this every night. You, Tucker Carlson, can argue with someone about something political. Yes. And it doesn't get violent, and you wrap it up at the end of the day, and you go home and you do it again the next day. Civility is all we have, and they're making it very clear. And this is something, I say this as someone that was on the left my whole life. I've never voted. I think one time in my life I voted for a Republican, which was Mike Bloomberg at his third term in New York City a long time ago, and that's really a hazy Republican situation, right? So I say this as someone that's been trying to call it out from what I considered my side for a long time. It's like, guys, let's rein this back in a little bit, because what is after civility? And I think we both know what it is, and it's pretty dangerous.
I wonder if she does.
I think they've realized that they've lost control of the party. The Clinton machine doesn't have control of the party anymore. The party's going through this Democratic Socialist or Socialist Democrat, whatever this thing, they'll drop the Democrat part soon enough. And she's trying to grab anything that'll make her feel relevant again. And she's not really that relevant. And in a weird way, she has to get out of the way for this other thing to take over. Not that I think the other thing is great, because believe me, I actually think this other thing, the more far left wing of the party, is much worse.
I'd take Hillary Clinton any day over some of these people.
We're going to look back and go, man, the Clintons were the good old days. And I say this, I voted for Bill Clinton twice. Okay, so Hillary, they're losing control, and that's why Eric Holder, when they go low, we kick them. All of these things, these are not coincidences.
Right.
This is not, Maxine Waters, find them and hunt them down, or whatever she said, and Cory Booker did the same thing. And I've seen articles about find Tucker Carlson in a restaurant. He's so upset that he won't be able to go to a restaurant. And it's like, if that's where we're at, we will look back and go, man, we really screwed up the most beautiful experiment that has ever been done in world history about how do you get different people from all over the world to come together and live together. We've done it right here. And it doesn't mean it's perfect for everyone. It doesn't mean that there aren't some racists. It doesn't mean that we have class issues and economic issues and all sorts of things. But if we don't pull back this thing, it will be much worse. And it will be much worse faster than anyone can imagine.
It's totally right, because it's more fragile than we acknowledge.
Yeah.
Dave Rubin, great to see you.
Likewise, my friend.
Very much. Rosie O'Donnell has been in a long-running, mostly one-sided battle with Donald Trump for many years. We'll end this week with the highlights of what she recently said, because, while disturbing, also kind of amusing.
This is not Russia. To Donald Trump and his pathetic band of white, privileged, criminal businessmen, I would like to say to him, niet, sir, niet, niet.
Our dad was She's been hating Trump for many years, but she's no closer to winning that debate. Yesterday on MSNBC, Rosie showed she still has not recovered from the 2016 election. Here's part of it.
We are going to right the ship. There's no way that he's going to prevail, because he's evil. He's dark. It's the opposite of what America stands for. I always thought, why didn't they counter-program his rallies, his Nazi-esque rallies? When he was elected, what I wrote on Twitter was, we should impose martial law till we make sure that the Russians weren't involved in the final tallies of the vote.
He wants to send the military to the border, so...
I want to send the military to the White House to get him.
Martial law? Nicole Wallace thinks that's a good idea. Dean Cain is an actor. Joins us tonight. Dean, you've been here all your life. Obviously, you're a famous actor. If I were running the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, I would call Rosie O'Donnell and say, pull back a little. Martial law, really? You're embarrassing us.
Yeah, well, I mean, that thing was a joke she said about sending the military over to get him out of the White House.
Yeah.
It was a joke, a thinly veiled joke. But when she did say, she tweeted martial law, impose martial law until we're sure the Russians had nothing to do, that was insane. I mean, that's a coup.
Well,
that's
it is insane.
It's crazy.
So but don't other people in her world say, look, Rosie, I get it, you don't like Trump, you're a liberal, okay, fine. But you're discrediting yourself and the rest of us by acting like a mental patient on TV. Don't do that.
Well, that sounds entirely reasonable, Tucker. Why would something like that happen?
No, I guess that's right.
Completely reasonable. No, I know, Rosie. I knew her back on our show back in the day, and we were very friendly and wonderful. I don't know that she would talk to me now, but I disagree with her.
Yeah.
And I would be happy to sit across from her and say, I disagree. And even on that show, all they did was laugh, and they're all on the same side. Why didn't anybody offer a dissenting opinion and say, well, that doesn't make any sense?
Yeah, why don't Nicole Wallace say, really, martial law?
I mean, because that
seems a little, So how often do you hear stuff like that here at dinner?
Monday through Sunday.
Monday through Sunday.
Occasionally, I just won't go to dinner, so I'll miss it that night.
So it's ubiquitous.
It's constant, and on every film set, I hear it all the time. But here's the funny thing: I'll hear it from some of the actors, but then we'll go through and we're shooting something, and the grip will give me a little bump and be like, hey, I'm with you. I know.
That's such an interesting point, and I've noticed this exact thing. How different are the political views of the crews, the sometimes unionized wage-earning crews, from those of the celebrities working on the set?
I would say they're diametrically opposed. That's been my experience, and I've only been doing this for about 40 years.
So don't the actors at some point say, I'm supposed to be on the side of the average person, the underdog. I'm surrounded by underdogs, people making 1/100 of what I make. but I hate them for their views? Is there any dissonance?
No, they don't hear that at all, because actors are, all we hear is what we want to hear most of the time. I'm putting myself in that camp because I am an actor, but I'm a Princeton-educated kid. I travel the world. I do things that I think have some substance in them. I talk to world leaders. I'm in bad places. But a lot of these people, you're coddled as an actor. And you're told, oh, you're so great all the time that people start to believe it, and they start to believe that their opinion means more than the guy who's, clapping the
I mean, if you're making $10 million a year and denouncing your cameraman as immoral, maybe you would get some self-awareness there.
Or at least, out of focus.
Yeah, exactly. Out of focus. DK, great to see you.
Tucker, always
Thank
a pleasure,
you.
sir.
That is it for us for tonight and for the week. We'll be back on Monday, the show that is the sworn and cheerful enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. DVR it if you can crack that mystery. Good night from Los Angeles. Hannity is next. More than anything, have a great and restful weekend. Put down the screen and enjoy your family.